I had only been gone for 10 weeks. 10 weeks working a dream internship in Boston, surviving off frozen burritos and caffeine, building connections I'd dreamed of since sophomore year. When it ended, I packed my duffel bag and caught a late-night bus back to Milwaukee, ready to surprise my family. It was supposed to be a happy return. But when I walked up to the front porch at 6:30 a.m., dragging my suitcase behind me, I noticed something odd. There was a new welcome mat, and the mailbox had someone else's name on it. I thought maybe I was sleep-deprived. Maybe my mom had changed the mat and added a roommate. Nothing serious. Nothing I couldn't laugh about over breakfast. But when I reached for my key and tried the lock, it didn't fit. I knocked. A woman I had never seen before opened the door in a bathrobe, a toothbrush in her mouth. She looked confused, then alarmed. "Can I help you?" I hesitated, forcing a polite smile. "Yeah, this is my house. I mean my parents' house. I live here." She squinted. "You must have the wrong address." She was about to shut the door when I blurted out, "Is Greg or Tanya Carter home?" She blinked. "I moved in last month. I don't know who that is." I sat on the curb across the street for 20 minutes. The summer heat was already rising. I called my mom. No answer. Then my dad. Voicemail. Then my older sister, Harper. She picked up on the third ring, groggy. "Sage, why are you calling so early?" I stared at the house, at the unfamiliar SUV in the driveway, at the porch I used to sit on with my dog, Leo. "Why is there someone living in our house?" Silence. You weren't supposed to be back until next semester," she said slowly. "They thought Mom and Dad thought you were going to stay in Boston." "I never said that. I was always coming home after the internship. I left half my stuff here." Another pause, then the worst words I've ever heard. "They rented your room out, Sage. They needed the money and they didn't think you'd be coming back." I had to force Harper to call Mom. 20 minutes later, my mother finally pulled into the driveway of the house I no longer recognized. Her old Subaru came to a hard stop. She stepped out, sunglasses still on, and didn't say a word. Just crossed her arms and looked at me like I was the one who had messed up. "Why didn't you call first?" she asked. That was her greeting. Not hi, not "we missed you." I was standing on the sidewalk with 2 bags and a laptop case, and that's what she led with. "I did," I said, multiple times. "We didn't know you were coming back," she repeated, like it excused everything. "We assumed you were staying in Boston. You said you were making connections, that maybe they'd hire you." "I never said I wasn't coming home." Mom sighed and motioned me toward the garage. It was already open. Inside were 2 plastic bins and a stack of old cardboard boxes, all labeled Sage in black Sharpie. My entire life, sorted and stacked like donations. I lifted the lid of one box, my high school track medals, my cap and gown, my sophomore year poetry journals. In another, my bedding, thrown in loose with a half-full bottle of shampoo. "You could have texted," I said. "You're an adult now, Sage. We had to make a decision," she replied, as if being an adult meant I was fair game for being erased. That night, I slept on the couch at Harper's apartment. Her fiancé looked uncomfortable the whole time, like I was a squatter who'd shown up uninvited. I didn't blame him. Even I felt like I didn't belong. Harper tried to soften it. "They've been struggling with money since Dad's back surgery. The rental income helps. It's not about you." But it was, because they never would have done that to her. She had a key to the house, a room waiting any time she came back. Pictures of her still hung on the wall. But my graduation photo? Gone. The next morning I got a text from my mom. "Can you come get the rest of your things? We need to clear the garage." That was it. No apology, no offer to talk. Just instructions. That's when I knew. I was done begging for space in a family that couldn't make room for me. After 2 days on Harper's couch, it became obvious I needed to figure something out. I wasn't going back to school for another 6 weeks. I had no room, no job, and I wasn't about to let my pride crawl back to the people who packed my life into storage boxes without a second thought. So I opened my laptop, logged into my university job portal, and applied to the first local listing I saw that offered housing. Night shift resident coordinator, Haven House Women's Shelter. The job description was blunt. Answer phones, keep the peace, manage the logbook, stay awake. Pay was modest. The catch? You had to live on site in a staff dorm room. I didn't think twice. The shelter director, Miss Carla Jennings, was a tall, silver-haired woman with a voice like steel wrapped in velvet. She didn't ask about my family. She didn't ask why I needed the room. She just asked, "Can you start tonight?" "Yes," I said. And just like that, I had a bed, a roof, and a purpose. That first night I barely slept. The walls were thin. The stories even thinner. One woman, Kelly, had just left a violent marriage. She spent most of the night staring at the ceiling. Another, Denisha, was 5 months pregnant and working the breakfast shift at a Waffle House across town. I watched, I listened, and for the first time since coming home, I stopped thinking about myself. Over the next few weeks I got better at the job. I learned when to call social services and when to just sit and offer someone a cup of tea. I helped fill out job applications at 2 a.m. I translated police reports for Spanish-speaking residents. I tracked down emergency diapers at midnight, and slowly, the ache of what I'd lost began to fade. Because these women, strangers, saw me. Not as someone who'd failed to meet expectations, not as a burden, just as someone who cared. One night, Denisha found me reading a Supreme Court opinion in the hallway. "Why you always reading them big legal books?" she asked, grinning. "I'm pre-law," I said, "trying to figure out how to make things less unfair." She nodded. "Good, we need more people like that." That night I wrote in my journal for the first time since Boston. They took my room, but they didn't take my voice, or my fight. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, hot, sticky, and quiet. I had just helped one of the residents file for emergency housing assistance when Miss Jennings called me into her office. She didn't smile often, but that day she did. "I've been watching you," she said, "the way you work, the way the women trust you." I shifted in my chair, unsure where this was going. "There's a community law clinic across town," she continued. "They host student volunteers during the academic year. I spoke with the director. They're looking for someone sharp, grounded. I told her about you." I blinked. "You told her about me?" "Yes, and she'd like to meet you." That Friday I sat in a cramped office with mismatched chairs across from Teresa Klein, a public interest attorney who'd spent her entire career fighting for tenant rights and domestic abuse survivors. She didn't ask for a polished resume. She didn't care about my GPA. She asked, "Why do you care?" And I told her the truth, because I know what it feels like to be left behind, to have everything familiar taken from you without warning. I can't fix what happened to me, but maybe I can help someone else before it happens to them. She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. "You start next week, 2 afternoons a week. You'll shadow me and run intake for student cases, unpaid, for now, but if you show me you're serious, we'll change that." It wasn't a grand scholarship or a parent's connection. It wasn't a handout. It was a lifeline offered not out of pity, but because someone saw something in me. Not my mistakes, not my pain, but my potential. That night back at the shelter, I sat on the edge of my narrow twin bed, staring at my duffel bag in the corner. Everything I owned was still packed. But for the first time since I got off that bus from Boston, I didn't feel like I was in transition. I felt like I was finally becoming something permanent. It started with a local news feature. The clinic where I volunteered had launched a tenant support campaign after a string of illegal evictions hit the neighborhood. We held a press conference, passed out flyers, even organized a town hall. I wasn't expecting to be interviewed, I was just there to help pass out water bottles. But when the cameras showed up, Teresa nudged me forward. "You speak clearly. People listen. Go." The clip that aired on Channel 4 that night was only 15 seconds long, but it was enough. Me, in a plain navy blouse, standing in front of a folding table saying, "Tenants deserve fair notice. No one should come home to find their lock changed or their belongings on the street." The reporter mentioned my name, my role with the clinic, and, somehow, my university. The next morning my inbox exploded. 3 emails, 6 text messages, 1 voicemail, all from my mother. "Sage, we saw you on the news. You didn't tell us you were doing legal work. We're so proud of you. Your dad says you speak like a real lawyer. We always knew you'd do big things. Call us. Let's catch up." It had been almost 4 months. 4 months since they rented out my room. 4 months since I sat in a garage sorting through my life like it was donation junk. Now, suddenly, I was doing big things and they were proud. I didn't respond. Later that week my sister texted me too. "Saw the story. Mom's been crying. They didn't handle things right, but they miss you." She followed up with a picture of our dad watching the clip on his phone. He was smiling. My brother was in the background, and for a second, just a second, I felt that pull, that old reflex, to want them back. But then I remembered the silence when I needed them, the way they changed the locks and told the new tenant, "Don't worry, she won't be back." Teresa noticed I was off during clinic hours. "You okay?" she asked, halfway through intake forms. "My family's reaching out," I said, "now that I'm visible." She didn't push, just said quietly, "Fame doesn't fix fractures, it just makes them harder to hide." That night I blocked the numbers again, not out of spite, but to protect the version of myself I was finally starting to believe in. By the start of fall semester I had turned 21 and officially aged out of the student intern label. I was still working with the clinic, still living in the shelter staff quarters, But something in me had shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was planning. Teresa noticed it first. The way I stayed late, the way I scribbled ideas in the margins of legal briefs. One night after a long tenant mediation, she leaned over and said, "What are you building in your head?" I hesitated. "Something more permanent," I said. It started as a sketch in my notebook, a place where students facing housing insecurity could get help before they hit a crisis. Not just legal support, but emergency funds, temporary shelter, job referrals, counseling. I called it Anchor Point, a place to hold steady. I pitched it to the law clinic's advisory board. They were polite, encouraging, non-committal, but Teresa pulled me aside afterward and said, "Don't wait for permission, start where you are." So I did. I put together a survey of housing insecure students at 3 campuses. I organized 2 community info nights. I pulled in 2 psychology grad students and 1 social work major as volunteers, and then I submitted a grant proposal, my first ever, $20,000 to pilot Anchor Point as a joint initiative between the clinic and the university. It was a long shot. While waiting for a response, I kept grinding, clinic by day, shelter by night, library on weekends. I didn't post updates, I didn't tag my parents, I didn't try to make them proud, I was too busy making myself proud. 3 months later, I opened an email that started with the words, "We're thrilled to inform you." I didn't read the rest right away. I just sat there, staring at the screen, letting the validation soak in. Anchor Point was happening, and this time, no one could take it from me. Not because it was mine alone, but because it was built with people who chose to show up for me. People who never asked me to shrink or disappear so they could feel comfortable. It arrived during a staff meeting, a plain white envelope tucked between a donation receipt and a coffee order form in the front office mail tray. My name was handwritten in black ink, the way my mother used to write notes for my lunchbox in 3rd grade. Inside was a letter. No return address, no phone number, just 4 pages of careful handwriting. The first line stopped me cold. "We don't know if you'll ever read this, but we needed to try." They wrote about how proud they were when I left for Boston, how they thought I'd outgrown them, how they made decisions out of fear, not cruelty, how watching me speak on the news was like seeing a version of me they didn't fully recognize, but always hoped I'd become. They didn't ask me to come home. They didn't mention the inheritance, the boxes, or the silence, but they did say this: "We failed you, and we can't undo that, but we hope someday you'll forgive us." I folded the letter and set it aside. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just felt still. That evening I walked to the shelter rooftop. The city buzzed beneath me, alive and indifferent. I stared out into the skyline, the wind tugging at my jacket, and then, for the first time in over a year, I wrote them back. Not to mend what was broken, not to start over, but to finish what they left undone. Dear Mom and Dad, I received your letter. I hear the regret. I recognize the pain behind your words. I also remember the silence, the decisions made without me, the day I stood on our front lawn with nowhere to go. I'm not writing to reopen old wounds. I'm writing to say, I made it. Without your support, without your house, without your approval. I made it anyway. I hope you find peace, but I've already found mine. Sage. I never mailed the letter. Some things are meant to be written, not sent. The next month, Anchor Point opened its first official drop-in center, complete with food pantry, peer counselors, and legal aid hours. We served 42 students in the first 2 weeks. One of them was a girl named Alana, 19, soft-spoken, afraid to tell her parents she'd dropped out. I didn't give her a speech, I just listened. When she left, she whispered, "Thank you for not judging me." I smiled. "Everyone deserves a soft landing," I said. I don't talk about my family much anymore, not because I'm hiding them, but because they no longer define me. I built a new life, one no one can box up, throw out, or forget.